For me, the number one most important thing about this training is that it's based on research, and you need to know the research to facilitate the training effectively. You might not need to know every detail of it, read the entire report cover to cover, but at the end of every chapter, there's an in brief section. And I would advocate that if you're going to facilitate this, you need to have read each one of those in brief sessions to understand it. The other important point about that is if you're going to introduce new content to the training, you need to be clear when you're facilitating between which content is based on the research and which content is not, or from another source.
I'm Paul Knox-Clark. I wrote the ALNAP study on leadership and worked with Leah Campbell to write the study on decision making, the two studies on which the training is based. I think one of the really good things about this training is that it's absolutely based in evidence. A lot of leadership training that you will come across is a bit speculative. You know, it's a bit sort of, well, we think this is a good idea. But this training is very much based in the research. So let me just tell you a little bit about how the research was done. We decided to do a study on leadership in 2014, largely because a lot of the evaluations that we were looking at, and also the State of the System report that ALNAP does, had suggested that leadership, field level leadership, was a real problem. And that although it was working in many places, there were also quite a lot of examples of leadership failure. For the leadership piece, we did a big review of the literature, including evaluations, to find out largely what the to the degree to which there was a problem and what the problems were, and also to see if we could find any relationships that were established between different ways of fulfilling those leadership functions and success. The second thing that we did was we identified in variety, we tried to get it broadly mirroring humanitarian action globally in terms of the organizations that took part and where the organizations were working. And, you know, it's not perfect, but it's a fairly good reflection of the variety of humanitarian action. We got officers who helped us by participating in the study from different organizations in different countries. And we asked each member of the decision-making team to fill in a questionnaire where they rated the degree to which they thought their office was effective at leadership. And they also gave answers to a bunch of other questions about how decisions were made, how the office was structured, and so on. And we were able to use all of those data to actually come up with statistically significant correlations between the things that the people in the participating offices said they did, and things and good, effective leadership. So we were able to see that there were, across that whole set, some things which did seem to relate very clearly to good leadership. We then did a fairly large number of interviews with the people who'd filled in the questionnaires to try and work out the nature of that relationship. So if, for example, we'd seen that there was a strong relationship between certain decision processes and effective leadership, we would ask the interviewees about that. We'd ask them whether they'd observed that, whether that was true in their experience or not. If they felt it was true, why they felt it was true. If they felt it wasn't true, why they felt it wasn't true. So to try and build up a counter-argument as well. And then we took all of that information, information from the literature, information from the statistical review, and information from the interviews, and we put it together in the report. One of the things that was left unfinished really at the end of the leadership study was that we knew decision-making processes were important, but we didn't really know in any detail what effective decision-making looked like in humanitarian response. And so we followed on with a second major study looking at decision-making. We first of all did a survey of available literature about making decisions in humanitarian context. As it turned out, there's not a huge amount of literature about making decisions in humanitarian context, but there is a lot about making decisions in emergency context, coast guards and burning oil rigs and police and fire service. So we did also draw on that literature. The next thing we did, which was rather innovative, was that we were lucky to have 50 colleagues who were decision makers in the field, who agreed to participate in a diary study where they wrote down in great detail a number of decisions they made over a period of about a month. And they told us what the decisions were about, the process they used, who was involved in making the decision, whether they made it by themselves or with others, and also things like how much stress they felt they were under, how much uncertainty there was in the context. And we were able to take that data and build up a really good picture of what was going on, which we backed up with interviews with them, and also do statistical analyses of relationships between how decisions were made and the perceived success of the decision making. So again, what we've got here is a really solid basis of data that underlies the training. And I think it, again, I would recommend that you read that report. There is much more, I think, in that report that you can use. And I really would, encourage you to read it. There's much more in the report that you can use than is actually here in the training package. And so if you are getting questions or there are areas of uncertainty, hopefully that report and also the decision-making report in the specific area of decision-making will address those questions.